Okay, your essay. Why is rainforest deforestation in the Amazon basin an important global concern? What measures could be taken to help alleviate this problem? Okay, these are the things you should probably write down for me. This doesn't need to be more than a page and a half type double space, somewhere in that ballpark. Loss of potential medicinal products. A lot of our medicines are plant-based. We haven't come close to documenting all the different plant species that exist in rainforest areas. Okay, loss of a potential gene pool for the improvement of agricultural crops. Again, we like to hybridize and gene splice to improve our agricultural crops, to make them more productive, more bountiful. Think of the gene pool still that we haven't even begun to explore in Amazon areas. There are literally thousands and thousands of different species of plants and animals in rainforest areas. Loss of endangered species. Now, there are some, you may not think this is important, but there's an ecosystem effect, right? If you wipe out one species, what effect does that have on many other little critters, right, in the area? And what effect does that have on the other critters that are dependent upon them? So loss of endangered species. Climate change. If you start messing with the climate in tropical areas, it can have effect on temperate areas where we live. Everything is connected in the atmosphere. Also, potential increase in global warming. When trees are alive, they take in CO2, right? CO2 traps heat and can warm up our planet. So when you burn those trees, CO2 is released also in the atmosphere. Slashing and burning trees is a double whammy. When they're alive, they're taking in CO2. When they're gone, they're no longer taking it in. And when you burn them, you release that carbon dioxide, CO2, carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Loss of indigenous cultures. Believe it or not, there are still many tribes in the Amazon that live in a totally primitive manner. I mean, it's hard to believe, relatively untouched by the outside world. So there have been researchers, anthropologists who try to live among these groups and try to learn about what primitive societies were like. How they, this won't surprise you, how they fight over territory, how they fight over females, right, to try to pass their gene pool on. There's one tribe that was studied where they have very little heart disease, and they found that they eat basically a plant and I think a fish-based diet, and they walk like 20, 30,000 steps a day. Virtually no heart disease at all among this indigenous group. So, loss of indigenous cultures. Now, part 2 of your essay, what measures could be taken to help alleviate the problem? The World Bank, which is an international lending institution, and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, these organizations are primarily supported by the United States and Europe. In the past, we have promoted projects that have led to deforestation, highways, maybe mining and timber products, things like this. So maybe the World Bank and the IMF can sponsor more sustainable use projects, ecotourism, sponges, twines. I saw this thing some Japanese firm was doing where they deforested a little bit and put in these ponds, and they were raising fish for sushi. So lots of different ideas that could be used for sustainable use. Debt for equity swaps, where environmental groups maybe pay out a portion of the foreign debt of a country in the Amazon. In return, these countries pledge to keep a lot of rainforest in the form of a national park that can't be touched. So that's called debt for equity swaps. Maybe the World Bank and some like private banks that hold debt for Latin America could let some of this debt go, because it can never essentially be paid back. Carbon trading. Let's say that we have an international agreement for global warming at some point that requires strict carbon emissions among countries. Right now it's kind of voluntary. The United States has pulled out of it, by the way, the Paris Agreement. But most all nations in the world are still in it. Let's say they can't meet their targets. What they can do is pay poorer countries to keep part of their rainforest forested. So poor countries like this, because they get money for essentially doing nothing, but it's a way for the richer nations to create a carbon sink, keep the trees still intact. That's called carbon trading. I saw that California is thinking about doing some of this with the offsets that industries use in our own state if they can't meet their carbon dioxide or pollution limits. We could promote, as United States and Europe and World Bank, promote reforestation efforts, restoration efforts in rainforest areas. Another thing we could do, we could be intelligent consumers. We could think about what we're buying. Now, I don't know anymore. I've kind of lost track of what fast food restaurants, if any, are using beef that is coming from areas that were once forested. You know, you could look that step up. I don't eat a lot of hamburgers anymore, so I don't really know. But I was going to buy a futon one year, and it was mahogany, and the lady couldn't tell me you know, that it came from plantation, didn't come from a virgin rainforest, so I didn't buy it. So I guess we can try to be intelligent consumers. So part 1 of your essay, write about loss of potential medicinal products, loss of a potential gene pool for the improvement of agricultural crops, loss of endangered species, potential climate change, including global warming, loss of indigenous cultures. Part 2, talk about encourage sustainable use, debt for equity swaps. Okay, equity is like what you may have in your house, something like that, where you owe less than the house is worth, right? So debt for equity swaps, carbon trading, promote restoration, reforestation projects, and be an intelligent consumer. Okay, I hope that helped you guys. Get this done, get it in on time. All right.